Alright, we're back at the Holden Arboretum, and I'm planning on walking the same trail today, although it occurred to me as I was doing that it isn't the same trail. And I was reminded of this Chinese proverb that says you can never step in the same river twice. So I guess we're never really walking on the same trail twice. Things are always changing. Every second, every fraction of a second, certainly every day. And that actually made me think of what I might even want to talk about today, which is something called impermanence, which is one of the key ideas, if you want to say, from Buddhism. But it's really just a fact. But it may be one of the most important facts to realize, because everything else kind of flows from it. If you really understand, not at an intellectual level, but at the gut level, that nothing is permanent in this world, that things are constantly changing, then it can change your whole perspective on everything. And the best place to see this change is in nature. Every year there's cycles of life and death. Trees that, in the springtime there's a resurgence of life, and then it blossoms and reaches its peak sometime in the summer or wherever, and then fades off again in the winter, and we go through that depressing cycle of snow here in Ohio, and then once again in the spring everything wakes up. I think just paying attention to the cycles of life and of nature and the seasons is just that enough to see that nothing is ever staying the same. And this sameness or permanence is an illusion that the mind creates, which goes back to what we were talking about in the previous sessions. Thinking and ideas. We have an idea about something, and that idea tends to take on a certain permanency in our mind, and that gives us the illusion of permanency. We see a bench and we say, oh, that bench is the same bench that I saw yesterday. It's a bench. Give it a name, and in the mind you have an image of that bench, which is just at the moment that you saw it. But as soon as you walk away from it, it's changing, and it's not that bench anymore. But the mind likes to keep that image of the bench and say, okay, that's the bench. And if I come here tomorrow, I expect to see that bench the same way, with some understanding that things change. But really what that is just the fundamental understanding that there is no thing. And when you think about it, a thing, nouns, words we give, things that we have a sense of permanency about, is an illusion. Really, there is no thing, there's only process, change. Everything's undergoing constant movement, change, reorganization. You can't pin anything down at any one particular moment and say this is that thing, because at the next fraction of a second it is now different. Any scientist, anybody that understands science understands this, at least at the intellectual level. If you again, this is an idea, but if you have this idea of the world as being built up from subatomic particles, or however, I think we have to be careful about that notion of something being built up from smaller parts, because that itself is an idea. But let's just take that idea for a moment. There's matter, there's elements, things are composed of those things, which are themselves most of the matter of the earth comes from a supernova exploding millions or billions of years ago. maybe even further. I'm not sure the exact time scales, where a star explodes and produces the elements of matter that we are composed of. And if you just follow that cycle back to as far as we can understand it, to the beginning of the universe, if it had a beginning, all you really understand is everything's constantly changing. And we're just sort of, we, as we see ourselves, are just existing in this very short period of time as sort of a, you know, a little blob of order, you know, that has come into existence at some point in time, and or so we think, and then go out of existence at some other point of time. But this is where I think if you really understand that, so many things make sense, because, you know, we have this, you know, the ego, which you're going to hear me talk about a lot, because that really is the source of all of our problems, the sense of self, of an identity. Who am I? When you start looking at yourself really, not as the image that you see of yourself, but as observe your body, your mind, what is it composed of, what, you know, what can I see physically, what can I observe in my mind, then you start to see that you are an ever-changing thing, right? Your body is different now than it was when you were younger. You look in the mirror now and you see an older person. I certainly do. And, you know, am I that younger person? Am I an older person? Which of those people are me? The younger version, the older version, the version yet to come? Well, there is none. I mean, if you sped that up and looked at yourself physically over all that time, you'd see that your body's constantly changing. But we like to say, okay, well, the body changes, sure, but there's some permanent thing in me, let's call it the soul, which is this idea of permanency, that there is some permanent part of me that, despite my acknowledging that there are things that change, still want to hold on to some permanent thing. Well, that permanent thing we call the soul, or in Hinduism it's called the Atman. I mean, everybody has some notion of this, because this is the ego, the saying, hold on, there's got to be something permanent, and I'm just going to assume there is. But one of the greatest insights that one can have is the realization that there is no permanent part of you. You are completely impermanent. Your body is impermanent, your mind is impermanent, changing constantly. And that if it's changing constantly, where is that permanent part of us? So this is when we may invent ideas like a spiritual world, where we say, well, there's this world we see, which is constantly changing. The material world, we all acknowledge that, but there's this spiritual world where there is a permanent thing, and that permanent thing incarnates in our body, or resides in this changing body for some period of time, and then when this body is used up, it moves on to another body. Well, that's a nice idea, but that's all it is, an idea. And we give that idea the sense of truth. Why? I mean, people have told you that, and you've accepted it because you are afraid, which is actually what I was originally going to talk about today, fear. You are afraid of being completely impermanent. You are afraid of the idea of insecurity, that there maybe you are just a bundle of memories, so to speak. You know, mentally, when you think about, well, who do you think you are? Right? Examine yourself. And we said there's the body, then there's the mind. And you say, what is the mind? Well, it's mostly memories. I mean, you have memories of yourself as a child, memories of what happened yesterday, memories of what happened 5 minutes ago. And that bundle of memories is you. If you go into it and say, okay, well, what if you took all those memories away? What else is left? Because most people, when they think of themselves, they think of like past lives, past memories. Even when people say, well, I had a past life, I remember that past life. Well, again, you're relating it to memories. Saying, okay, there's memories are somehow permanent across lives. Well, as best we understand, memories are stored in the brain. We know that physically, people can lose their memories even while they're alive in this body, and that memories are not even permanent. I mean, we see examples of that all the time. People get dementia, amnesia. So memory is a physical thing, as we talked about before. It's stored somehow. We don't really need to know exactly how. This isn't about analyzing the brain or neurology or physiology or anything like that. We just recognize that there is some storage of memory in this physical thing we call the brain, and that when that brain gets disrupted, certainly if the brain is destroyed, right, and we know that, experiments have been performed that can alter your memory, your perception, everything. I mean, which really gives us a good indication that the brain is sort of the mechanism of, it's the center, right, of your mental being. It's where all your senses come into and are processed and stored, giving us this sense of memory, which then, as we talked about previously, thinking is a reaction to that memory. So memory is sort of at the center of it all. Really, it's these memories we hold on to that gives us this sense of permanency or continuity. From one moment to the next, we see that we're changing, but we also have these memories, and that gives us that sense of permanence. That memory is sort of permanent, right? We think it is. It's not. It's gone when the brain is gone, but a memory can last a long time in the brain. I can remember things that happened to me when I was a child, so wow, it's permanent, but they're not real. Those memories are just fragments, partial sensory recordings of something that happened that's not real anymore. It's not there anymore. It doesn't exist in the same sense. It exists as a memory, but that's like a photograph of, you take a picture of something, that picture is not the thing. So recognizing the picture of the thing is not the thing is the same as saying the memory is not the thing. And it just gets back to the point of the impermanence of these ideas, these memories that we have. And going back to what I was talking about memory then, so deconstructed memory a little bit there again, and then say, okay, you are your memories. You are your past. That's your conditioning. That is what has made you you. In AI terms, it's the knowledge you were trained on, right? The knowledge that the LLMs are trained on is their identity in some sense. And people are afraid to give up those memories because that is you. So fear motivates a desire to find or come up with a sense of permanency in the world. So we invent ideas like the soul, which essentially would be, okay, those memories somehow from this life may continue into another life, where that life may be in your idea of heaven, so that's where you go. But do you carry your memories with you to heaven? I mean, that's part of your physical form. Or you're reincarnated, and those memories somehow get carried on. How? By what mechanism? There's no mechanism that we understand today that would allow that to happen. And so we just allow for the possibility, and there are things we don't understand, but we say, okay, there could be something we don't understand that allows that to happen. And I really think that is where most people are that adhere to traditional religious beliefs. They just accept because somebody told them that, and also because their own ego tells them that something must go on with me. Why are we so afraid of ending? What is so bad about ending? Things end all the time. I mean, we talked about this at the beginning, the seasons are all about birth and ending. And the flower that comes up this spring, is that the same flower that came up last spring and then died in the winter and then came up again? I mean, there is an illusion there of rebirth, right? There's an illusion that says, that thing that died has now come back. But it's not the exact same flower. It's similar. It has a similar genetic makeup, but it's not exactly the same. And it doesn't carry over the memories of that past flower. It may behave very similarly and react very similarly, and in that sense it is the same. But it's composed of different particles, different matter. I mean, it sprung out of the ground, so we could watch the process of growth occurring and say, okay, well, that's not the same thing because I just watched it grow from dirt to that flower. So just being intelligent enough to observe that and say, okay, there is a process that is occurring that is always changing, but there are recognizable things that we like to hang on to, and there are patterns of nature that repeat. I mean, organisms, plants that have certain classifications and types are patterns of nature that repeat, but they are not the same, and they are gone. They come and they go, birth and death. It's a constant process of being born and dying, and that is the nature of impermanence. What's wrong with that? That is actually the way things work. So by that same notion, we also are, like the flower. We come, we're here, and by we, I mean the temporary we. I don't mean the permanent we or me. There is a me, right? It's just a temporary me, and that's sort of the thing we don't want to understand. Some people say, well, there is no me. Well, there is a me. The me is this bundle of memories. The me is this physical form. But it's also not constant. It's not permanent. It's always changing. And so this is where intelligence really helps us, because even the idea of being nothing can become an idea that we hold on to and say, okay, well, then I'm nothing. Well, that's true in a sense. You are no thing, right? Which is nothing. No permanent thing. That is your nature. But there is a process that is occurring. There is some process there. And so to deny everything and say, well, the world is completely an illusion is also not true. Which is what a lot of people do, because they don't fully understand what's happening. They don't observe. They take an idea and they run with it. Either they take the idea of permanency and say, okay, well, I have a permanent nature, or they go the exact opposite route and say, there's nothing, no me, the world is an illusion, I am an illusion. Well, that's not true either. The truth is sort of in the middle, right? The truth is there is a constant flux, a constant change of things. There's a temporary me that comes and goes. There's a temporary you. But that is the truth, right? And this is what we're trying to get to, is what is true. Forget what people tell you. Forget the idea of a soul or the Atman or whatever you may have, whatever idea you may have about yourself that someone told you. Just let it go for a while and say, what if I never read a book? I never was instructed on who I am. How would I know about myself? And you observe. So I observe everything changing. I observe myself, my mind changing. I mean, it's sort of that simple. But you have to stop bringing in the past and coloring it and trying to justify it. Just let that process of thinking and knowledge go for a while and observe without any bias, and you will see, you will understand impermanency. But you have to understand it as a fact, not as an idea. I mean, I'm talking about it now, so these are all ideas of impermanency. That is not the same as understanding impermanency at a much deeper than intellectual level. And if you want to consider it that way, just that simple understanding, again, is all it takes to make everything fall into place. Because once we recognize we're impermanent, constantly changing, we fear, or at least say the fear of death, is that fear of ending. But if you completely understand that you're ending all the time, you're ending in one way and you're beginning in another, that you're constantly changing forms, there is really no beginning and ending in a strict sense. It's constant change, even from before you were born. The matter you're composed of existed somewhere, and it just formed this pattern of you, and it will dissolve at some point as well, but the matter you're composed of will go on. So parts of who you consider yourself to be, you know, will go into the ground and maybe be part of that flower that gets born next spring. So this idea of death and rebirth can be replaced in some sense with just this understanding of constant change and impermanence. And you know, it's one of the key principles of Buddhism, but I do feel that I don't like to bring in the past, even Buddhism and all that, because now let's go read the suttas, and you know, or if I bring in Atman, let's go read, you know, the scriptures or whatever, you know, holy book we consider holy, and then, you know, then thinking ends, you know, or inquiry ends, and we start looking for answers from the experts to tell us who we are. But let's just observe who we are. We are impermanent. We are constantly changing, and the recognition of that impermanence, the first maybe, or it's not first, it's not an ordered thing, but that recognition of impermanence naturally leads to the understanding of yourself as an impermanent entity, which is another principle in Buddhism, not that we need to bring all this in, but which is no self. This idea that we have no permanent self. It's a natural consequence of impermanence applied to your own being. So again, it flows from that understanding. But the problem we have here is we're looking at this from an intellectual level, and that's where we have to pause for a moment and say, let's not get caught in these concepts and ideas, because these are just explanations of a deeper truth that can be understood only through direct perception and observation, not through intellectual analysis. But analysis can, or talking or explanations can help point something out. The analogy is often pointing at the moon is not the same thing as seeing the moon. And so we're pointing these things out so that you can examine it. Is it true? Is it not true? Examine impermanence on your own and see, does this make sense? Am I constantly changing? And if you're holding on to this idea of permanency, why are you doing that? And instead of being afraid, just understand how things actually are and see what happens. Because maybe the best form of security is the complete understanding that there is no security and that everything is insecure. So I think that's, you know, one thing I wanted to talk about today, and I think it's important. It's another sort of foundational element, if you want. You know, any one of these ideas, if you go into them deep enough, not as an idea but as a truth, find the truth in them, everything else is contained in that truth. There is not two truths. You don't need to know the truth about thinking and the truth about impermanence and the truth about fear. Truth explains them all. Not explains, truth is them all. And you know, they often say the universe is in a grain of sand, and I think that's similar here. The truth is in everything. If you, wherever you start, and you inquire deeply enough, you will discover truth, and then understand in that sense everything. Right? You don't need a separate explanation for all these aspects of us. And I will be talking about different aspects of us because, you know, like fear, love, desire, intelligence, pleasure. I mean, all these ideas we have, but get to the root of it all, right? What's the root of all these aspects of ourself? And to do that, you don't need, in some way, to go through every single element. Just go into any one thing deeply. All right. Well, maybe that's enough for this session. I'll end it there. Maybe we'll just walk in silence for a little bit. And by the way, this is one of my favorite places to sit here at Holden. There's a little knoll that has a chair up here, and it looks over Corning Lake. And especially in the summertime when it gets warm, I like to come up here and just sit in this chair and do nothing. Just look across the lake and watch the birds and all the other animals. I've seen turtles crawl up here from the water, which is kind of cool, but you can see this is a really nice spot to just sit and not think. And maybe we'll be lucky enough to get some blue skies here soon.